The roar of the waves against the bluff faded to a steady background hum as Argoz and Evelyn moved north along the rocky edge. They kept low, using the uneven terrain and patches of tall grass for cover. The air seemed to thrum with tension, each step heavy with the sensation of being watched. Evelyn glanced over her shoulder for the third time in as many minutes, her grip on her blade tightening. "Tell me it's not just me," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the night's natural sounds. "It's not just you," Argoz replied, her voice low but calm. Her sharp eyes swept the tree line to their right, but nothing moved. The stars illuminated the lake to their left, and the open water offered no solace. "Someone or something is keeping an eye on us." Evelyn exhaled slowly, her jaw tightening. "But where? I don't see anything." "Doesn't mean it's not there," Argoz said, her tone sharper now, her claws flexed instinctively at her sides, itching for a target. The ground sloped gently downward as they approached the north side of the compound. The faint gurgling of water joined the rhythmic crashing of the waves, and soon the river came into view. Its dark surface gleamed faintly under the starlight, winding like a silver thread through the landscape. Argoz crouched behind a rocky outcrop, motioning for Evelyn to do the same. "There," she said, nodding toward the riverbank. Evelyn followed her gaze. The docks came into view first, simple wooden structures extending into the water. A handful of boats were moored there, their outlines just visible in the dim light. Further down, faintly illuminated walking paths snaked along the river's edge, leading toward the imposing walls of the compound. And then there was the entrance, a low, reinforced doorway embedded in the base of the main building, partially obscured by shadows. A single dim light flickered above it, casting an eerie glow on the steel door. "That's a way in," Evelyn murmured. Her gaze swept over the area lingering on the docks. "But it's too quiet. No patrols, no guards." "Doesn't mean it's safe," Argoz said, her tone wary. She tilted her head slightly, her ears twitching. "The river's too loud to hear anything sneaking up on us." Evelyn nodded, her eyes narrowing. "So we assume they know we're here." Argoz's smirk was faint but determined. "Always." As they crept closer, the sensation grew stronger, the prickle of unseen eyes boring into them, the weight of something watching from the shadows. Evelyn's hand darted out to stop Argoz, her eyes scanning the tree line. "You feel that?" Evelyn whispered. Argoz nodded, her voice a quiet growl. "Every step, but I can't pinpoint it." Evelyn's breathing slowed, her senses sharpening as she scanned the area. The treetops swayed faintly in the breeze, their shadows dancing across the ground. The docks creaked softly as the boats shifted in the current, but no matter how hard she looked, she couldn't find the source of the unease. "Keep moving," Argoz said finally, her voice firm. "Whatever's out there, it's waiting. Let's not give it the satisfaction." They closed the distance to the riverbank, moving with careful, deliberate steps. The walking paths were surprisingly well kept, their smooth stones glinting faintly in the starlight. Argoz crouched low as they approached the edge of the compound, her sharp eyes locked on the flickering light above the doorway. "Looks clear," she murmured, "but it won't stay that way." Evelyn nodded, her grip on her blade tightening. "What's the plan?" "Same as always," Argoz said with a faint smirk. "We get in, get what we need, and get out. Quietly." "Quietly," Evelyn echoed, her voice dry. "Right." But as they prepared to move, a faint sound reached their ears, a soft rustling in the trees behind them, too deliberate to be the wind. The sensation of being watched surged, setting their nerves on edge. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. "We're not alone." Argoz's claws flexed, her sharp eyes darting to the tree line. "No sudden moves. We stick to the plan." But even as she spoke, the shadows around them seemed to deepen, the air thickening with tension. Whatever was watching them was close, and it wasn't going to stay hidden for long. The forest fell silent, save for the rustling of leaves in the faint breeze. Argoz and Evelyn exchanged a wary glance, their weapons at the ready, the tension between them crackling like static. Then it began. A low, mournful howl split the night, rising and falling with a haunting melody that sent shivers racing down their spines. It echoed across the open field, coming from the direction of the compound, but the sound seemed to stretch and twist, making it impossible to pinpoint the source. Evelyn's fingers tightened on her blade. That doesn't sound normal. Argos's sharp eyes darted between the tree line and the faint glow of the compound behind them. It's not, and we need to move. But before they could take another step, another howl rang out, closer this time, then another from a different direction. The air grew heavy with the sound, layers of it weaving into an unsettling chorus that seemed to close in around them. "We're surrounded," Evelyn whispered, her breath hitching as she scanned the darkness. "Not yet," Argoz hissed, her voice steady despite the unease curling in her gut. "Stay close, and don't panic." The first movement came from the corner of Argos's vision, a flicker of silver fur darting between the trees. She turned, her claws flexing, but it was gone before she could get a good look. Then, from the shadows, Alpha emerged. The massive dire wolf stepped into the faint starlight, his pitch-black fur gleaming like obsidian. His yellow eyes glowed with an intelligent, almost mocking light as he tilted his head, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a snarl, but wasn't a smile either. "He's toying with us," Argoz muttered, her sharp claws digging into her palms. "He knows we're cornered." Evelyn backed up a step, her gaze darting to the other side of the clearing. The movement came again, this time accompanied by a low, guttural growl. Beta, the grey she-wolf, stalked out of the shadows, her posture stiff with mistrust. Her cold, calculating eyes locked onto Evelyn like a predator assessing her prey. Evelyn raised her blade, her stance defensive. "We can take them." But before Argoz could reply, a third figure darted out from behind a cluster of trees, a sleek younger wolf with a mottled brown and silver coat. Omega loped into view, his movements lighter and more curious, but no less deliberate. The three wolves spread out, their silent communication palpable as they began to circle the two women. "Change of plans," Argoz said, her tone tight. "Run!" The wolves' howls rose again, and this time they were closer, almost deafening. The women bolted, their footsteps crunching against the forest floor as they veered off in different directions. Alpha lunged toward Argoz, his massive frame cutting her path off. She spun sharply, darting toward the nearest tree, her heart pounding as she scrambled up the trunk. Her claws dug into the bark as she hauled herself onto a sturdy branch, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Below her, Alpha paced, his glowing eyes fixed on her with an unsettling mixture of amusement and hunger. He let out a short, sharp bark, and Omega appeared at his side, circling the base of the tree with eager curiosity. "Great," Argoz muttered, clutching the branch tightly. "Stuck in a tree. How original." Meanwhile, Evelyn's flight brought her dangerously close to the river. She skidded to a stop at the edge of the water, the faint sound of the current blending with the relentless howls behind her. Her chest heaved as she turned, her blade ready. Beta appeared from the shadows, her cold eyes gleaming with distrust. She prowled closer, her movements slow and deliberate, her growls low and menacing. "Come on, then," Evelyn muttered, gripping her weapon tightly. "Let's get this over with." But Beta didn't attack. Instead, she paced back and forth, her eyes locked on Evelyn as if daring her to make the first move. The she-wolf's tactics were clear. She was pushing Evelyn toward the water, cutting off her escape and isolating her further. The wolves' howls shifted again, rising into a crescendo that filled the forest with an almost oppressive weight. Evelyn and Argoz couldn't see each other anymore, the dense trees and distance between them cutting off any chance of regrouping. From her perch, Argoz glared down at Alpha, who had settled into a mockingly relaxed position beneath her tree. His ears twitched as Omega let out an excited yip, darting back and forth as if practicing his intimidation tactics. "You think this is funny?" Argoz called down, her tone laced with frustration. "Wait till I get my claws on you." Alpha's only response was a low, rumbling growl that sent a shiver down her spine. Evelyn, meanwhile, took a cautious step back, her boots nearly touching the river's edge. Beta's growls deepened, her posture lowering as she prepared to pounce. Rose paced the private room in the Shadow Realm bar, the tension rolling off her in waves. Her polished boots clicked softly against the stone floor, and her dark eyes darted to the radio on the table. The once faint crackle of static had gone completely silent, and it was driving her to the edge of her patience. She snatched the device, turning the dials sharply and flipping through the secured channels. Come on," she muttered under her breath, the growing frustration evident in her voice. Nothing. Slamming the radio down, Rose took a deep breath and ran her fingers through her hair. She had known this mission was risky, but losing contact entirely was another level of bad. Silas's voice broke through her thoughts as he appeared in the doorway, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the room. "Trouble?" he asked, his tone calm but tinged with curiosity. Rose shot him a withering glare. "Trouble?" "No, Silas, everything is just peachy," she snapped, her sarcasm razor-sharp. "Radio silence in the middle of a recon mission is exactly what I hoped for." He raised an eyebrow, stepping inside and crossing his arms. "You knew this was a possibility. If they're near the Pack's territory, interference is a given. They're not exactly known for welcoming guests." "Oh, don't I know it?" Rose said, her tone dripping with frustration. "But this isn't interference. It's gone. Completely. Nothing on any frequency." Silas studied her for a moment before speaking. "And you're worried?" Rose's scoff was immediate. "Please. Worry implies I'm emotionally invested. This is annoyance, Silas. Pure, unfiltered annoyance." He didn't respond, letting her words hang in the air. Rose huffed, crossing her arms and glaring at the silent radio. The bar was quieter than usual tonight. The buzz of conversations on the supernatural side had dulled to a murmur, and even the human side seemed unusually subdued. It was as if the unease Rose felt had seeped into the very walls of the bar. She turned back to Silas. "This feels wrong." He nodded slowly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it's just what happens when you step too close to something you shouldn't." Rose's smirk returned, though it lacked its usual bite. "Oh, don't get cryptic on me, Silas. I'm perfectly capable of handling secrets and danger. It's the waiting I can't stand." Rose stared at the radio for a long moment before grabbing it again, turning the dials methodically, searching for anything, any signal, any noise, even static. But the silence remained absolute. "Damn it," she muttered, tossing it back onto the table. Silas watched her with a faint, knowing smile. "What are you going to do?" Rose met his gaze, her dark eyes sharp. "What I always do," she said. "Find another way to get the information I need. If the Pack's involved, this just got a lot more interesting." "And the team?" Silas asked, his tone neutral but edged with curiosity. "They can handle themselves," Rose said firmly, though the faintest flicker of doubt crossed her features. "But I'm not sitting here twiddling my thumbs while we wait for them to get back." Silas inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Just remember, if you go poking the bear, don't be surprised when it bites back." Rose smirked. "Good thing I have a habit of taming bears." Rose lounged in the private room of the Shadow Realm bar, her sharp eyes fixed on the tracker app on her tablet. The dot representing Darren's location blinked steadily, right at the same spot her team had last checked in. A slow, calculating smile spread across her lips. "So, the wolves finally made their move," she murmured, tracing her finger along the map. "And they've got my people." Her mind raced as she pieced together the situation. The Pack had been a mystery for too long, an untouchable force hiding in the shadows. But now she had something they couldn't ignore, a reason to walk right up to their door. Rose set the tablet down and leaned back, tapping her nails against the armrest of her chair. She wasn't just going to negotiate. No, this was an opportunity to make an entrance, to show them exactly who they were dealing with. But first, she had to plan. Rose stood and strode to the bar's main floor, her heels clicking sharply against the polished stone. She called for Silas, who appeared almost immediately, his massive frame looming over the patrons like a shadow. "Silas," she said, her tone brisk, "I've found them." His brow furrowed. "The pack?" "And my team," Rose replied. "They've taken them. I'm going to get them back." Silas crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "You realize what you're walking into, don't you?" "Oh, I'm well aware," Rose said, a sharp edge to her voice. "That's why I'm going to do it my way." "Which is?" Rose smirked, the kind of smirk that made even Silas hesitate. Loudly. Rose didn't waste time. Within the hour, she was behind the wheel of her sleek black sedan, the tracker app open on the dashboard screen. The signal remained steady, guiding her north toward the dense woods where the pack's headquarters lay hidden. The road grew narrower as she drove, the towering trees swallowing the light, until only her headlights illuminated the path. The hum of the engine was the only sound. But Rose's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. She had leverage, information about Ravina's dwindling drug supply. She also had charm, wit, and a knack for turning even the worst situations to her advantage. Still, she wasn't blind to the risks. The pack wasn't known for their hospitality, and this wasn't exactly a social visit. But if there was one thing Rose excelled at, it was making people see her as indispensable. By the time she was done, the pack would either respect her or regret underestimating her. The compound came into view suddenly, its large metal structure looming in the starlight. The area was quiet, but Rose could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching her. She parked her car just outside the workshop, stepping out with deliberate grace. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, but it wasn't the natural surroundings that set Rose on edge. It was the palpable energy of the place, a low hum of power that seemed to seep into her skin. "Charming," she muttered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her heels clicked against the gravel as she approached the workshop's door. She didn't knock. She raised her fist and banged on the heavy metal door, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the still night. "All right, wolves," she called out, her voice sharp and commanding. "Time to play nice. Open up." The door remained closed, but Rose knew better than to think no one was listening. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a deadly purr. "I know you're in there, and I know you have something of mine. Let's talk before this gets complicated." The night seemed to hold its breath as Rose stood before the pack's imposing workshop door, her silhouette outlined by the faint glow of her car's headlights. The metal vibrated faintly from her repeated pounding, the sound echoing into the quiet woods like a challenge. Her smirk never wavered, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. She knew they were watching. They always were. The pack didn't miss anything that entered their territory, and her bold approach would be no exception. "Let's not waste time," she called again, her tone edged with both irritation and amusement. "You've got something I want, and I've got something you need. Open the door, and let's talk like civilized beasts." The faint sound of rustling reached her ears, just beyond the edge of the tree line. Rose tilted her head, her smirk deepening. They were testing her, sizing her up. It was exactly what she'd expected, and exactly what she'd planned for. As the tension hung in the air, the heavy door creaked, the sound grating against the stillness. It opened just enough for a figure to step forward, their face shadowed but unmistakably wary. Rose's smirk grew sharper. "Now, that's more like it." She stepped forward, her confidence unwavering, even as the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on her. The pack, the gem, the tangled web of alliances and rivalries, it all hinged on this moment. Behind her, the woods remained still, the faint glow of the northern lights reflecting off the distant lake. Inside the workshop, unseen eyes watched, waiting to see how the queen of the Shadow Realm bar would fare in the den of wolves. With one final glance over her shoulder, Rose stepped through the door, the heavy metal closing behind her with a resounding clang. The game had begun.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.